It started with something so small that I barely gave it a second thought. A box, old and dusty, hidden in the back of our closet. It was a weekend afternoon, and Lauren, my wife, was out shopping. We'd been married for nearly 8 years, a whirlwind of laughter, shared dreams, and the usual ups and downs. I wasn't snooping, not intentionally. I was looking for a photo album when I stumbled upon it. The box looked like it hadn't been touched in years. The faded label on top read "Private." I almost put it back. But a feeling, that gnawing sensation deep inside, kept me from closing the closet door. I didn't know why, but suddenly I had to open that box. Inside were letters, dozens of them. Each envelope had the same looping, elegant handwriting, addressed to Lauren but from someone I didn't know. I picked up the first one, my hands shaking slightly, as I began to read. My dearest, you looked beautiful today, as always. I hate how little time we have together. Sometimes when I see you with him, it feels like I'm losing you. I know you love him, but I need to believe you love me, too. I can't keep doing this without you reminding me that I matter. That first letter hit me like a punch to the gut. I read it again, hoping I'd misunderstood, that there was some reasonable explanation. But as I read on, every letter deepened my dread. The way he wrote about her, the way he described their moments together. It wasn't just an affair. It was a relationship. A second life. My breath caught in my throat. Lauren had always been perfect in my eyes, everything I wanted. I thought our life together was all she needed, but now I was staring at undeniable proof that it wasn't. There was someone else. There had been someone else for God knows how long. The letters didn't have dates, but they felt recent. One of them even mentioned a place she had traveled for work just a few months ago. A work trip, she had called it. We had laughed over breakfast when she got the call, joking about how she'd have to spend 2 days in some little town upstate. It was one of those normal, mundane moments that married couples share. I never thought to question it. Now I realized it wasn't work at all. I closed the box and sat there, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. My thoughts were racing: betrayal, confusion, fear. Every happy memory of the last few years felt tainted. How long had this been going on? How could I have missed it? And worse, what was I supposed to do now? I heard the door creak open downstairs. Lauren was home. Quickly, I shoved the letters back into the box and pushed it to the back of the closet. I couldn't confront her. Not yet. I needed more answers. I needed time to process what I had just uncovered. My mind was swirling as I walked down to the kitchen, trying to act normal. There she was, my wife, beautiful, smiling, as if nothing had changed. But for me, everything had. Hey, babe, she said, flashing that familiar smile that used to melt my heart. I picked up some stuff for dinner. Thought we could have a nice night in. I forced a smile, my mind screaming in protest, but my lips betraying me. Sounds great. How could she stand there, acting like everything was fine? How could she pretend that this life we had was enough for her when she was living a lie? I wanted to scream, to demand answers. But I knew I couldn't. Not yet. Over dinner, I tried to keep the conversation light, pretending that nothing had changed. She talked about her day, about work, and about some project she was working on. I nodded along all the while, my thoughts racing back to the letters. To the lies. To him. Who was he? How long had she been seeing him? As she poured herself another glass of wine, I couldn't help but imagine her pouring the same wine with him. In another city. In another house. I wondered if he knew about me, or if I was just some background character in their little fantasy. I wanted to ask, but the words stuck in my throat like glass. That night, as Lauren slept beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My mind couldn't stop replaying everything I had read. The tone of the letters, the love in them, was so foreign. It was raw, intimate, and passionate in a way I hadn't seen in years. I felt sick. As the hours ticked by, I came to a decision. Tomorrow, I would find out everything. I wouldn't confront her, not yet, but I would dig. I would track down who this man was. I needed to know the truth, even if it destroyed me. I couldn't live like this, not knowing. The letters had cracked open something dark inside me, a suspicion that had been buried deep. Now I had to know how deep the lies went. The next morning, I waited until Lauren left for work. The second she was out the door, I tore through the house. I searched her bags, her computer, everything. At first, I found nothing. No messages, no hidden emails. It was like she had covered her tracks perfectly. But then, tucked deep in the back of her desk drawer, I found a receipt. A hotel receipt. In another city. A city where she had no work. A city where she had no reason to be, unless it was with him. My stomach dropped as I stared at the date on the receipt. It was from a month ago. She had spent 3 nights there. The same 3 nights I had thought she was on a work trip. It wasn't work. It was him. I could feel it in my bones. And then, something else caught my eye. On the back of the receipt was a handwritten note. A name. His name. Josh. The name Josh stared back at me, scrawled hastily on the back of the hotel receipt like it was nothing. To her, it probably wasn't. But to me, it was everything. I sat down at the desk, my hands trembling. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears, each beat a reminder that my entire world was crumbling. Who was Josh? What did he mean to her? The internet was my first stop. I typed his name into the search bar, my fingers moving faster than my thoughts could keep up. I didn't even know his last name, just Josh and the hotel in some town hours away. I scrolled through countless social media profiles, every face I saw filling me with dread. What if I found him? What would I do then? Hours passed with no luck. But I couldn't give up. Not when I was so close to the truth. I needed to know who this man was. I needed to know what he meant to my wife. Desperation gnawed at me, and then, something clicked. The hotel receipt had a number on it, a booking confirmation number. I grabbed my phone and called the hotel. My heart was in my throat as I waited for the receptionist to pick up. Good afternoon, Timberline Hotel. How may I assist you? The woman's voice on the other end was polite, cheerful even. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what I was even going to say. But then the words spilled out of me before I could stop them. Hi, I'm calling about a recent stay at your hotel. I believe it was booked under the name Lauren Parker? I held my breath, waiting for the receptionist to confirm or deny my wife's presence there. There was a pause, the clatter of a keyboard, and then she spoke again. Yes, I see a reservation under that name. It was for a 3-night stay last month. My stomach churned. It was real. She had been there. I was wondering, I continued, my voice shaking now. Was there anyone else staying with her? Did she mention another guest? The receptionist hesitated. I'm afraid I can't provide that information unless you're the guest or authorized on the reservation. I swallowed hard. It's fine. Thanks. I hung up, my hand still shaking as I placed the phone on the desk. I had expected answers, but instead, I was left with more questions. Lauren had been there, in that hotel, but I didn't know who she was with. My head was spinning, and my heart felt like it was being crushed under the weight of betrayal. Josh. The letters, the hotel, the secrets. Everything pointed to him. I stared at the hotel receipt again, running my fingers over the ink as if I could somehow make sense of it all. But then, I noticed something else, a child's drawing on the back. It was faint, barely visible, but there it was, crudely drawn stick figures, with 3 letters written above them, M-O-M, and Dad. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. What the hell was this? My mind raced. Lauren and I didn't have children. We had talked about it, sure, but we had always agreed to wait a few more years. So why was there a child's drawing on this receipt? Who drew it? And why was it here? I felt a wave of nausea hit me as the worst possible thought crept into my mind. Was Josh not just some fling? Could it be more than that? Was there a child? I couldn't stop myself now. I needed more answers. I grabbed Lauren's laptop, praying that it wouldn't be locked. To my relief, it wasn't. I opened it and clicked through her emails, her social media, anything that might give me a clue. But it was like she had wiped everything clean. There were no messages, no suspicious emails. It was almost as if she had covered her tracks too perfectly. But then I found it. An email from 2 years ago, buried deep in her inbox, from someone named Josh Reed. The subject line was innocent enough. Meeting follow-up. But something about it felt off. My hand shook as I clicked on it. Hey Lauren! It was great to see you today. I can't stop thinking about our conversation, about what it could mean for us. I know we've been cautious, but I can't help feeling like we're building something real. I want you to know I'm here, no matter what. And I'll do whatever it takes to be a part of this new chapter. All my love, Josh. A part of me shattered in that moment. 2 years. This wasn't some recent fling, it had been going on for years. I couldn't breathe. My mind flashed back to all the moments we had shared over those 2 years. Our anniversary dinners, vacations, the little moments at home watching TV. And all that time, she had been with him too. Living this double life. My fingers moved faster now, scrolling through the emails. Some were short, others longer, but all of them were filled with that same sickening affection. There were even attachments, photos of them together in places I didn't recognize. Places she had probably told me were work trips or weekends with friends. But the last email, that was the one that broke me completely. It wasn't from Josh. It was from a lawyer. I opened it and scanned the words, my heart racing faster with every sentence. Dear Ms. Parker, as per our discussion, the custody arrangement for your son with Mr. Reed has been agreed upon. Attached are the final documents for your review. Please let us know if you have any further questions. My head spun, and the room seemed to tilt. Custody arrangement? Son? I staggered backward, nearly falling into the chair. My hands were ice cold, my mind racing so fast that I couldn't keep up. Lauren had a child. With him. She had been living an entirely separate life with another man, raising a child I knew nothing about. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at that email, at the undeniable proof of her betrayal. How had she hidden this from me for so long? How had I missed it? Then I heard the front door creak open. Hey, babe! I'm home! Lauren's voice floated in from the hallway, as cheerful as ever. I closed the laptop and stood up, my heart pounding in my chest. My mind was a storm of confusion, pain, and rage. But I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. Not until I had more answers. Not until I knew the full extent of the lies. I walked out of the office, forcing a smile, feeling like a ghost of myself. How was your day? She asked, her eyes bright as if nothing had changed. It was fine. I lied, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. I couldn't let her see the storm brewing beneath the surface. Not yet. But soon. Soon I would tear her world apart, just like she had torn mine. That night I barely slept. I lay beside Lauren, her steady breathing the only sound in the room, while my mind replayed everything I had discovered. A child. How could she have kept a child from me? And Josh, who was he really? How had they built this secret life without me ever knowing? I stared at the ceiling, feeling like I was sinking into a dark pit. Part of me wanted to grab her and shake her awake, demand answers right then and there. But I couldn't. Not yet. I wasn't ready to hear the truth from her lips. I wasn't ready for the confirmation that the woman I loved had shattered our life together. Morning came, and Lauren woke up as if nothing had happened. She kissed me on the cheek, muttering something about a meeting she had later in the day. I watched her move around the room, her normal routine playing out while my world had completely unraveled. I'll be back by 6, she said, grabbing her purse. We could order in tonight? Yeah, sure, I muttered, barely processing her words. She smiled at me before heading out the door, leaving me alone in the silence of our home. Once she was gone, I sprang into action. I needed to know more about Josh, more about this child. I had so many questions that were burning inside me, threatening to explode. I couldn't confront Lauren yet, but I needed something solid, something undeniable that she couldn't explain away. I returned to her laptop, diving deeper into her emails. There had to be more, something that would give me the full picture. I scrolled through message after message, each one a reminder of how deep her betrayal ran. And then I found it, an email that sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. Josh, we need to talk. I've been thinking a lot about what we're doing, about Noah. Noah. The name hit me like a freight train. I had spent the last few days wondering about their child, and now, here it was, his name, staring back at me like some cruel joke. I don't want to hurt him, but I can't keep living this double life. He's starting to ask more questions, and I don't know what to tell him. You and I need to figure this out. I'm not saying we should end things, I just need time to think. I'll be back in town next week, and we can talk more then. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of it all crushing me. Noah. Their son. I was living in a house with a woman who had a child I never even knew existed. How long had she been juggling both lives? How long had she been coming back from those work trips and slipping back into our life, acting like everything was normal? My hands trembled as I shut the laptop. This was too much. I needed to get out of the house, needed to clear my head before I completely fell apart. Grabbing my keys, I drove aimlessly for a while, the images of Lauren and Josh together playing over and over in my mind. Eventually, I found myself parked outside a cafe in town. I sat there for a long time, staring at the people walking by. Couples. Families. It felt surreal, watching life go on while mine was falling apart. I couldn't keep living like this. I needed answers, real answers. And I needed them from Lauren, not from a trail of emails and hidden letters. But I also needed to be prepared for whatever came next. I wasn't ready to face the truth until I had some kind of plan. I took a deep breath and made a decision. I would confront Josh. I wasn't sure what I would say, or if he would even talk to me, but I needed to see the man who had stolen my wife's heart. I needed to look him in the eye and ask him why. The next few hours were a blur of searching. I knew his full name now, Josh Reed, and a quick internet search gave me what I needed. He lived in the very town where Lauren had been staying, the same place on the hotel receipt. I stared at the address for a long time, my stomach churning with a mixture of fear and rage. I had to do this. I had to face him. The drive to Josh's house was filled with tension. I rehearsed 1,000 different scenarios in my mind, each one more disastrous than the last. What if he denied everything? What if he laughed in my face? Worse, what if he confirmed it all and I found myself standing there, completely broken? I pulled up to his house, a modest place in a quiet neighborhood. For a moment, I sat in the car, my heart racing. This was it. There was no turning back now. I knocked on the door, my fists clenched at my sides. When it opened, I was met with a man who looked about my age, tall, fit, with a casual smile that instantly disappeared when he saw me. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice calm but wary. "Are you Josh Reed?" I asked, barely able to get the words out. "Yeah, who are you?" I swallowed hard. "I'm Lauren's husband." The blood drained from his face. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. He looked like he had just seen a ghost. I could see the gears turning in his mind, trying to figure out what to say. But no words came. Finally I spoke, my voice low and full of bitterness. "How long?" Josh opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked away, guilt written all over his face. "I didn't know she hadn't told you," he finally muttered, his voice barely a whisper. I felt like I was going to explode. "Didn't know? You've been seeing my wife for 2 years, and you didn't know? What about your son? What about Noah?" Josh's eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw real fear in them. You know about Noah?" "Yes, I know," I hissed. "I know everything. So you better start talking." Josh looked down at his feet, his hands gripping the edge of the doorframe. For a moment, I thought he might slam the door in my face, but instead, he sighed deeply and stepped aside. "Come in," he said quietly. I followed him into the house, my heart pounding. I had no idea what I was walking into, but one thing was clear: my life was about to change forever. Josh led me into a small living room. It was simple: pictures of landscapes on the walls, a few toys scattered near the couch. My eyes darted around the room, looking for any trace of Lauren, any sign that she had been here. But it was the toys that caught my attention. Noah. Their child. A boy who didn't know I existed, just as I hadn't known about him. I couldn't believe this was real. Josh motioned for me to sit, but I couldn't. My legs felt like they might give out, but I needed to stand. I needed to stay in control, or whatever control I had left. "So," Josh began, his voice hesitant, "I didn't think this day would come." I clenched my fists, my mind still spinning. "How long, Josh? 2 years, right? How long have you been doing this behind my back?" He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah. About 2 years. I met Lauren at a work event. We hit it off, but it got complicated." "Complicated?" I laughed bitterly. "You've been sleeping with my wife. You have a son with her. That's not complicated. That's betrayal." Josh flinched at my words. "Look, I'm not proud of this. I'm not trying to defend what we did. I didn't even know she was married at first. She told me later, after things had already." He stopped, his eyes meeting mine for the first time. "After things had gone too far." I felt a wave of nausea rise up in my throat. "And you stayed with her anyway?" He didn't answer. His silence said everything. I turned away, pacing the room as anger burned in my chest. How could she do this? How could she build an entire life with another man and a child, all while pretending to love me? I wanted to scream, to break something, but all I could do was stand there, breathing hard. "What about Noah?" I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "How old is he?" "He's 3, Josh replied quietly. 3. So this had been going on longer than I thought. My knees felt weak. Lauren had been seeing Josh, sleeping with him, and they had a child together, all while I had been living in a fantasy, believing our marriage was real. I had never felt so betrayed, so utterly destroyed. "Does he know about me?" I asked, almost afraid of the answer. Josh shook his head. "No. He just knows that his mom visits sometimes. He doesn't know about you. Lauren never mentioned you in front of him." The rage inside me flared again. My wife had managed to keep me hidden from her other life, like I was some dark secret. It was unbearable. I turned back to Josh, my voice trembling. "Why are you still with her? You must have known this couldn't last forever. Didn't you ever think about what would happen if I found out?" Josh nodded, his face etched with regret. "I did. I thought about it all the time. But I love her, man. I know it's messed up, but I love her. And I thought maybe one day she'd leave you, and we could be together. For real." I wanted to hit him, to make him feel even a fraction of the pain I was feeling, but I couldn't. He looked so lost, so pathetic. He had built his life around a lie, just like I had. And now, everything was crashing down for both of us. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside me. "Where is she right now?" Josh's eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite read. "I don't know. We haven't talked much this week. She said she needed space." "Space?" I laughed bitterly again. "She's been using space to manage 2 lives. She's been playing us both." Josh didn't respond. He knew it was true, and we both knew that whatever love we had for Lauren, it wasn't enough to keep her from tearing everything apart. Suddenly, I heard the front door creak open. My heart jumped into my throat. I turned to see Lauren standing in the doorway, her eyes wide with shock. She hadn't expected to see me here. Her face drained of color as her gaze shifted between me and Josh, piecing together what was happening. "Matt," she whispered, her voice shaking. What are you doing here? I stared at her, barely able to contain the fury bubbling inside me. What am I doing here? Are you seriously asking me that? You've been lying to me for years, Lauren. You've been living a whole other life. Did you think I wouldn't find out? She stepped forward, her hands trembling as she reached out toward me. Matt, please let me explain. Explain? I barked, taking a step back. Explain how you've been seeing Josh behind my back? Explain how you've had a child with him. How long were you planning to keep this secret from me? Forever? Tears welled up in her eyes, but they did nothing to soften the anger I felt. I never meant for this to happen, she said, her voice cracking. I didn't plan any of this. It just happened. Don't give me that. I snapped. You made choices, Lauren. You chose to be with him. You chose to have a child with him. And you chose to lie to me, every single day. Lauren's eyes filled with tears, but I didn't care. She had played me for a fool, and no amount of tears was going to change that. I glanced at Josh, who looked just as broken as I felt. We were both victims of her lies, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for him. Not now. I'm done, Lauren, I said, my voice cold and final. I can't do this anymore. Matt, please. No. I cut her off. It's over. The room fell into a suffocating silence. Lauren stood there, her face pale and her body shaking. I could see the panic in her eyes, the realization that she had lost control of everything. I turned toward the door, every step feeling like I was walking away from a life I no longer recognized. Josh didn't say a word, and neither did Lauren. There was nothing left to say. As I stepped outside, the cool air hit my face, and for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. But the weight of the betrayal still hung heavy on my chest. I didn't know what my next move would be, but one thing was clear: everything had changed. And there was no going back. I drove aimlessly after leaving Josh's house, the events of the last hour playing on repeat in my head. Lauren's tearful face, Josh's hollow apologies, it all felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. My grip tightened on the steering wheel as the betrayal sank deeper into my bones. How could everything I thought I knew be a lie? I pulled into a quiet parking lot near a lake, a place I used to go when I needed to clear my head. Today, though, there was no peace to be found. My thoughts were a storm I couldn't control. Lauren, the woman I had loved and trusted for nearly a decade, had destroyed everything we had built together. I had always thought our marriage was solid, even through the tough times. And now? Now, it felt like a cruel joke. I got out of the car and walked toward the water, staring out at the still surface. The calmness of the lake felt like a mockery of the chaos in my mind. For years I had lived in the shadow of a lie. A lie that had a name: Noah. The child they had together. The son I never knew existed. The weight of it all hit me again, and I dropped down onto a bench, my hands covering my face. I had no idea what to do next. Part of me wanted to confront Lauren again, to demand more answers. How had she been able to live two lives so effortlessly? How could she have looked me in the eyes, kissed me goodnight, and still gone back to him? I thought back to every moment I had shared with her over the last few years. The little things. The times she had been distant, the work trips, the nights she came home late and blamed it on traffic. It all made sense now, and that realization crushed me. I had been blind. Worse, I had trusted her without question. The sound of my phone vibrating in my pocket pulled me from my thoughts. I pulled it out and saw Lauren's name on the screen. I stared at it for a moment, my chest tightening. I couldn't face her. Not now. Not yet. But she kept calling, and eventually I answered. Matt? Her voice came through, shaky and strained. Please, I need to talk to you. There's nothing left to say, Lauren, I said, my voice cold. You've said enough with your actions. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I'm so sorry. I didn't want to hurt you. I never wanted any of this to happen. I let out a bitter laugh. Well, congratulations. It happened. And now, I have to live with the fact that the woman I loved has been lying to me for years. Please, she begged. Let me explain. Just meet me. Let me talk to you in person. I hesitated, torn between the anger boiling inside me and the desire for some kind of closure. But the truth was, I needed answers. As much as I hated her right now, I couldn't move on without knowing the full story. Fine, I muttered. Where? The park, she said, relief evident in her voice. The one we used to go to when we first started dating. The park. Of course, she'd picked that spot. It was where we used to sit for hours, talking about our future together, dreaming about the life we'd build. And now, it was where I'd hear about the life she'd built behind my back. Give me an hour, I said before hanging up. When I arrived at the park, the sun was starting to set, casting an orange glow over the playground and the trees. It felt surreal, standing there, knowing I was about to hear the truth about the betrayal that had ripped my life apart. Lauren was already there, sitting on one of the swings, her head bowed. She looked up as I approached, her eyes swollen from crying. For a moment, she looked like the woman I had fallen in love with all those years ago, the woman I had trusted with everything. But that image was shattered now. Matt, she said, standing up, her voice small and trembling. I'm so sorry. Save it, I snapped. I don't need apologies. I need the truth. She flinched at the harshness of my tone but nodded. You deserve the truth. Then start talking. She took a deep breath, her hands wringing together nervously. I didn't mean for it to happen. I swear. When I met Josh, I didn't plan on this. It just happened. I crossed my arms, glaring at her. It just happened? You've been with him for years, Lauren. You have a child with him. That doesn't just happen. Her face crumpled, and she wiped at her tears. I know. I know it sounds like an excuse, but I was confused. Confused? I cut her off, my anger rising. You were confused, so you decided to build a second life? You didn't seem confused when you were lying to my face every day. She sobbed harder now, her shoulders shaking. Matt, I never stopped loving you. I swear. It's just, I didn't know how to stop. Once Noah was born, it became so much more complicated. I couldn't just walk away. I shook my head, disbelief washing over me. You couldn't walk away from him, but you were perfectly fine living a lie with me? Her eyes pleaded with me, but I couldn't bring myself to care. I thought I could fix it, she whispered. I thought maybe one day, I'd figure out how to tell you, but every time I tried I couldn't do it. I was scared. Scared of what? That I'd find out you're a fraud? That everything we built was a lie? My voice cracked with emotion, despite my best efforts to stay calm. She shook her head furiously. No! I was scared of losing you. I didn't want to lose us. I laughed bitterly. You lost me the moment you decided to be with him. She reached out, trying to grab my hand, but I stepped back, my heart hardening against her touch. What about Noah? I asked, my voice low. How long were you planning on keeping him a secret from me? Was he just part of your other life that I wasn't allowed to know about? Lauren sobbed again, clutching her arms around herself. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to make you understand. I stared at her, my mind spinning with disbelief. I don't think you ever planned to tell me. She opened her mouth to protest, but I stopped her. No more lies, Lauren. You built a life with him. You had a child with him. What the hell was I supposed to be in this picture? Your backup plan? She shook her head, crying harder now. No, Matt, you weren't a backup. You are my husband. I laughed again, the sound hollow in the fading light. Husband? Don't use that word with me. You don't know what it means anymore. The silence stretched between us, the weight of her betrayal hanging in the air like a storm ready to break. I don't know how we fix this, I said finally, my voice flat. Maybe we don't. Maybe it's already broken beyond repair. Lauren's face crumpled, and she sank back down onto the swing. I don't want to lose you. You already did, I whispered. And with that I turned and walked away, leaving her sitting there in the twilight. She might have called after me, but I didn't hear it. I couldn't hear anything over the sound of my heart breaking. The drive home from the park felt like a blur. I didn't even remember getting into the car or how I managed to make it home. All I could think about was the look on Lauren's face, the tears, the regret, the desperation. Part of me had wanted to believe her, to believe that this was all some horrible mistake, that we could somehow fix things and go back to the life we once had. But I knew better. Some wounds were too deep to heal. I pulled into the driveway and sat there for a long time, staring at the house that had once been our sanctuary. The place where we had built a life together. Now, it felt like a monument to lies, to everything I had never known was happening behind my back. I felt like a stranger in my own life, unsure of what was real anymore. After a while, I forced myself out of the car and into the house. It was quiet, too quiet. I glanced at the clock. Lauren wouldn't be home for another hour, and I wasn't sure what to do with myself until then. The silence was suffocating, but I didn't want to break it. I didn't want to face the reality of what had just happened. The conversation in the park replayed in my head on a loop, her tearful pleas echoing in my mind. I don't want to lose you. You already did. My own words haunted me. They had felt final in the moment, but now, alone in the emptiness of our home, I wasn't sure anymore. Could I really just walk away from 8 years of marriage? Could I truly leave behind the woman I had once loved so deeply, despite everything she had done? My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a key turning in the lock. My heart leapt into my throat as the door creaked open, and Lauren stepped inside. She froze when she saw me sitting on the couch, her face pale and eyes swollen from crying. Matt, she whispered, her voice fragile, like she was afraid to break the silence between us. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I just sat there, staring at her, waiting for her to say something, anything, that might make this all make sense. She stepped forward, wringing her hands together nervously. I know you don't want to hear it, but I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you. You keep saying that, I said, my voice flat. But it did happen, Lauren. And you did hurt me. For years. She flinched at my words, tears welling up in her eyes again. I didn't know how to stop. I was trapped between two worlds and She broke off, covering her face with her hands. I didn't want to lose either of you. I felt a surge of anger rise up in my chest. So what? You thought you could just have both of us? Play house with me while you had a son with him? Her tears fell harder now, and she shook her head. No, it wasn't like that. I was going to end it, I swear. You weren't going to end anything. I snapped, cutting her off. If I hadn't found out, you'd still be lying to me. You'd still be running off to see him and pretending like nothing was wrong. She didn't argue. She couldn't. We both knew it was true. The weight of her silence only made the betrayal feel heavier. I loved you, I said quietly, my voice breaking. I gave you everything I had, and this is how you repay me? I loved you too, she cried, her voice desperate. I still do. Please, Matt, I don't want to lose you. Her words hung in the air between us, and for a moment, I almost believed her. I almost wanted to believe that she still loved me, that somehow we could find a way to rebuild what had been shattered. But then I remembered Noah. The child she had with another man. A whole other life she had hidden from me. And the weight of that truth crushed any hope I had left. I don't think I can do this, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Lauren's face crumpled. Please don't say that. We can fix this. We can go to therapy, work through it, anything. I'll do anything. I shook my head, unable to look at her. How do we fix this? How do we come back from this? You lied to me for years, Lauren. You have a child with him. She stepped closer, reaching out for me. I know it seems impossible, but we can try. Please, Matt. I'll do whatever it takes. I stood up, stepping back from her touch. I don't think I can forgive you. Not for this. Her sobs filled the room, and I turned away, unable to watch her break down in front of me. My heart was shattered, and I didn't have the strength to put it back together. Not for her. Not for us. I'm going to stay at a hotel for a few days, I said, my voice hollow. I need time to think. No, she cried, reaching for me again. Please don't go. We can talk about this. We can fix it. I shook my head, grabbing my keys from the table. I can't be here right now. As I walked toward the door, I heard her collapse onto the floor behind me, her sobs growing louder. It took everything in me not to turn around, not to go to her and try to comfort her. But I couldn't. Not after everything. I stepped out of the house, closing the door behind me. The cool night air hit my face, and for a moment I just stood there, trying to breathe. Trying to process what had just happened. But I couldn't. It was all too much. I got into my car and drove away, my chest tightening with every mile I put between us. I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do, but I knew I couldn't stay in that house. Not with her. Not after everything. The hotel room was small and impersonal, but it felt like a refuge. I threw my bag onto the bed and collapsed onto the chair by the window, staring out at the city lights below. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart, not my own. I pulled out my phone, staring at it for a moment before dialing a familiar number. Hey Matt, what's up? It was Dan, my oldest friend. We hadn't talked in weeks, but right now, I needed someone to ground me, someone who didn't know the nightmare I was living. I need to talk, I said, my voice cracking. What's going on? He asked, concern immediately replacing his casual tone. I hesitated, unsure of where to start. How do you tell someone that your entire life has been a lie? That your wife has a secret child with another man? That everything you thought you knew was falling apart? It's Lauren, I said finally. She's been lying to me. For years. There was a pause on the other end of the line. What do you mean? I swallowed hard, my throat tight. She's been seeing someone else. For years. She has a kid with him. Jesus Christ, Dan muttered. Matt, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to do, I said, my voice shaking. I don't know how to move on from this. You don't have to figure it all out right now, Dan said gently. Take it one step at a time. You don't have to make any decisions tonight. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Yeah. One step at a time. But as I sat there in the silence of the hotel room, I couldn't help but wonder if I would ever find a way to pick up the pieces of the life that Lauren had shattered. Or if some things were too broken to ever be repaired. The next few days passed in a fog. I stayed at the hotel, my phone constantly vibrating with messages and missed calls from Lauren. I couldn't bring myself to respond. Every time I looked at her name on the screen, all I felt was the sharp sting of betrayal. Even when the anger ebbed, the hollow ache of knowing I was never the man she fully loved stayed with me, suffocating. I went through the motions, eating, sleeping, trying to distract myself with TV or meaningless tasks. But nothing could pull me away from the reality that my life had been split into two parts, before I found out, and now. The clean, idealized version of my marriage was gone, replaced with the mess she'd left behind. By the third day, I knew I couldn't stay holed up in the hotel room forever. As much as I wanted to avoid facing the fallout, I had to start making decisions. The thought of going back to the house filled me with dread, but I couldn't avoid it any longer. I drove home that afternoon, feeling like I was walking into a battlefield. My heart pounded as I pulled into the driveway, unsure of what I'd find. The house was quiet, Lauren's car nowhere in sight. I hesitated before stepping inside. The house felt the same, but different. It had been only a few days, yet it already felt foreign to me, like a place I no longer belong. Every corner, every picture on the wall, seemed to mock me with memories of a life I thought was real. I walked through the living room, running my hand over the back of the couch, the place where we had shared so many nights together. I wondered how many of those nights had been filled with lies. I wasn't ready to pack up and leave, but I couldn't stay here with her. The house, once a home, was now just a reminder of everything that had gone wrong. I had just begun to gather a few things when I heard the door open behind me. My heart skipped a beat, and I turned to see Lauren standing in the doorway, her face pale, eyes red from crying. For a long moment neither of us spoke. The weight of what had happened hung between us like a storm cloud. "Matt," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't know you'd be here. I needed to get some things," I said coldly, trying to keep my emotions in check. "I'll be out of your way soon. Please don't go," she said, stepping toward me, her voice trembling. "We need to talk." "We've already talked, Lauren," I replied, turning away from her. "What more is there to say? I don't want to lose you," she said, her voice breaking. "I know I've hurt you, but I love you. I always have." I spun around, my anger boiling over. "Don't say that. Don't you dare say you love me, Lauren. Love doesn't do what you did. Love doesn't lie for years, cheat, and keep a whole other life hidden. You didn't love me, you loved what you could get away with." Her face crumpled as tears streamed down her cheeks. "It wasn't like that. I swear. I never wanted to hurt you. Yet you did," I snapped. Over and over again. Lauren collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands as her sobs filled the room. It should have made me feel something, sympathy, maybe, or at least the lingering affection I had once felt for her. But instead, all I felt was exhaustion. I was tired of the lies, tired of the endless apologies that came too late. I sat down in the armchair across from her, leaning forward as I spoke, my voice low but steady. "Why did you do it?" She lifted her tear-streaked face, her eyes pleading. "I don't know. I was lost. I loved you, but when I met Josh, something shifted. I didn't want to leave you, but I couldn't let go of him either. And when Noah was born..." She trailed off, her voice breaking again. My jaw clenched at the mention of Noah. The child she had with another man. "And you never thought I deserved to know? You never thought maybe, just maybe, you should have been honest with me?" She wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweater, her hands trembling. "I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to break your heart. You did that the moment you decided to keep living this lie," I said bitterly. "You didn't just break my heart, Lauren. You shattered it." She nodded, defeated, as more tears spilled down her face. "I don't know how to fix this." "We can't fix this," I replied, my voice soft but firm. "You've already broken too much." We sat in silence for a long time, the weight of everything that had been said hanging in the air between us. I didn't want to hurt her, but she needed to understand that there was no coming back from this. No matter how many apologies she gave, no matter how much she cried or promised to change, the damage was done. Finally she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "What happens now?" I stared at her, my mind racing. What did happen now? Divorce felt inevitable, but I hadn't even begun to process the logistics of it. There were so many things to untangle: our finances, the house, the life we had built together. And even though I wanted to be rid of her, the thought of ripping apart everything we had created felt overwhelming. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I need time to think." Lauren nodded, wiping her eyes again. "I'll give you time, but please, don't shut me out. We can still figure something out." "I don't think there's anything left to figure out," I said coldly, standing up from the chair. "I'll stay at the hotel for a while longer. We'll talk when I'm ready." Without another word, I grabbed my bag and walked toward the door. As I reached for the handle, I paused, glancing back at her one last time. She sat there, broken and fragile, looking like a shell of the woman I had once loved. But that woman was gone. She had been gone for a long time. I walked out of the house, closing the door behind me. The cool evening air hit my face, but it did little to ease the tightness in my chest. I stood there for a moment, trying to gather my thoughts, trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. Divorce seemed like the only option. I couldn't stay married to her, not after this. But part of me, the part that still held on to the memories of what we once had, was terrified of letting go. Of starting over. Of being alone. As I drove back to the hotel, the weight of it all pressed down on me. I had never felt so lost, so unsure of what the future held. The life I thought I had was gone, and now I was standing on the edge of something new, something uncertain and terrifying. And for the first time in years, I didn't know who I was without her. The days blurred together after I left the house. The hotel room had become a sort of limbo for me, a place where I could hide from the reality of what was happening. Lauren called several times a day, leaving long voicemails that I didn't listen to. I couldn't. Every message was the same, filled with apologies, promises to change, and desperate pleas for forgiveness. But none of it mattered. The life we had was over, and nothing she said could bring it back. I spent most of my time avoiding the big decisions. I hadn't spoken to a lawyer yet, though I knew I had to. The thought of starting the divorce process was overwhelming. Every time I thought about splitting our lives apart, dividing the house, the bank accounts, even the memories, I felt like I was going to collapse under the weight of it all. But as the days turned into weeks, I knew I couldn't stay in this limbo forever. I couldn't hide in the hotel room, pretending that time would somehow erase the betrayal and pain. If anything, time was making it worse. I wasn't healing. I was stuck, drowning in the silence and the what-ifs. It was Dan who finally pushed me to take the first step. He'd been checking in on me every day since I told him about Lauren, and while I appreciated his support, I hadn't been completely honest with him about how bad things had gotten. I couldn't tell him that some mornings I woke up and wished I could go back to before I knew the truth. To a time when ignorance was bliss, and I didn't feel like my entire world had collapsed. "Matt, you can't keep doing this," Ben said over the phone one evening. "You need to make a move. Whether it's filing for divorce or talking to her, you need to move forward." "I know," I muttered, staring at the ceiling of the hotel room. "I just don't know where to start." "You start by calling a lawyer," Dan said, his tone firm but supportive. "You don't have to do this alone. I know you're hurting, but the longer you wait, the worse it's going to get. Trust me, man, you'll feel better once you take control." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "Yeah. You're right." I knew he was. Hiding from the situation wasn't going to fix anything. It was time to face it, no matter how much it hurt. The next morning, I made the call. The lawyer's office was cold and clinical, with sleek furniture and polished floors that made the place feel more like a high-end spa than a law firm. I sat in the waiting room, fidgeting with my phone, my nerves on edge. I hadn't told Lauren about the appointment. I didn't even know if she was expecting it, but I couldn't bring myself to give her a heads up. Part of me wanted to punish her for what she had done. I was still processing the reality of everything: her affair, the child she had with Josh, the years of deceit. Every time I thought about Noah, that small, innocent boy, my stomach turned. He didn't deserve any of this. And yet, he was part of it now, a reminder that Lauren's betrayal had real, permanent consequences. "Mr. Anderson?" A woman's voice broke through my thoughts. I looked up to see a young assistant standing in the doorway, smiling politely. "Mr. Parker will see you now." I stood up, taking a deep breath as I followed her into the lawyer's office. My hands were sweaty, my heart racing. This was it. The first step toward untangling the mess Lauren had created. The first step towards something I wasn't even sure I wanted: freedom. Mr. Parker was an older man, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. He motioned for me to sit down as he shuffled through a stack of papers on his desk. "Matt, is it?" he asked, glancing up at me. "Yeah," I replied, sitting down and trying to steady my nerves. "I've looked over the basic details of your situation," he said, leaning back in his chair. "It's pretty straightforward, but there are a few complications, mainly the house and any joint assets. Have you discussed any of this with your wife yet?" I shook my head. "No. Not yet. I haven't even told her I'm doing this." He nodded, scribbling something down on his notepad. "That's fine. It's not uncommon for one spouse to be unaware at this stage. The important thing is that you're taking steps to protect yourself. Have you considered whether you want to fight for the house, or are you looking for a clean break? The house. The place that had once been my home. Now, it felt like nothing more than a symbol of everything that had gone wrong. I thought about it for a moment before answering. I don't care about the house, I said quietly. I just want to move on. Mr. Parker nodded again, making another note. I understand. A clean break might be the best option here. Given the nature of the affair and the fact that there's a child involved, it could get messy if she fights you on it. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. The meeting continued, with Mr. Parker laying out the steps we would need to take to file for divorce. Each word he said felt like a nail in the coffin of my marriage. As much as I knew this was the right thing to do, it didn't make it any easier. It didn't erase the memories or the love I had once felt for Lauren. And it certainly didn't erase the pain. When the meeting ended, I left the office feeling numb. The process had officially begun, and there was no turning back. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the paperwork in my hands. It felt surreal. This was it. The end of the life I had known. The end of us. I didn't tell Lauren about the divorce papers right away. I didn't know how to bring it up, and part of me was still waiting for some kind of sign that this was all a bad dream. But as the days went on, the reality of what I had set in motion became harder to avoid. One evening, as I sat in the hotel room, staring at my phone, I realized I couldn't avoid it any longer. Lauren needed to know. She deserved to know. Even if I couldn't stand the sight of her right now, she deserved that much. I picked up my phone and dialed her number, my heart pounding as it rang. She answered on the second ring, her voice filled with cautious hope. Matt? We need to talk, I said, my voice flat. There was a pause. Okay. When? Now, I replied. Can you meet me at the house? She agreed, and an hour later, I found myself standing in the living room, waiting for her. The same living room where we had shared so many moments together. The same place where I had once felt safe, loved. Now, it felt like a stranger's house. The door opened, and Lauren stepped inside. She looked nervous, her eyes red from what I assumed had been days of crying. She was holding on to some thread of hope, I could tell. But I was about to cut that thread. What is it, Matt? She asked, her voice soft. I took a deep breath, pulling the divorce papers out of my bag. I'm filing for divorce. Her face crumpled, and for a moment she looked like she might collapse. No, please, she whispered, stepping forward. Please don't do this. We can still fix this. No, Lauren, I said, my voice steady. We can't. There's nothing left to fix. You destroyed it. She reached for me, but I stepped back, holding up the papers between us like a shield. This is the only way forward. Tears streamed down her face as she stared at the papers in my hand. I don't want to lose you, she sobbed. Please, Matt. You already lost me, I said quietly. The moment you decided to lie to me. The moment you built a life with him. This is the end, Lauren. I set the papers down on the coffee table, the weight of the moment hanging between us. I could see the heartbreak in her eyes, the devastation. But it was too late. There was no going back. I'll have my lawyer contact you, I said, turning toward the door. I'm moving out. I'll get my things this weekend. Matt, please, she begged, but I couldn't look at her. I couldn't bear to see the ruin of what we had been. Without another word, I walked out the door, closing it softly behind me. I stood in the driveway for a moment, staring up at the house. The place where we had built our life together. The place that was no longer mine. As I got into my car and drove away, I felt the finality of it settle over me. This was the end of one chapter, but the beginning of another. It was terrifying, stepping into the unknown. But for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could start over. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, hit like and leave a comment with your favorite part. We'd love to hear your perspective.